He hid his true identity for his son and willingly lived as a farmer. But to protect his son, he picked up a gun again and fought to the very end. He is a spiritual symbol of the Western cowboy, and the only surviving photograph of him once sold for a staggering $2-3 million. You can call him Henry, but he has an even more legendary name.
He's who?
This film is set against his life and tells the story of Billy the Kid in his later years, when a single choice led him down a dark path. After enduring endless bloodshed and violence, Henry finally settled in Oklahoma. At this time, civilization and law had not yet reached this western land, and he, his son Wyatt, and his late wife's brother worked the barren soil day after day. Wyatt had long grown tired of this life, watching his uncle take a hunting rifle back into the mountains again, while he himself had never even touched a gun, leaving him quietly disappointed. His uncle patiently tried to comfort him.
Soon enough, you'll be able to do all the traveling and shooting you want to. Stop fretting about it.
Though Wyatt had never handled a gun, his skill with a knife while breaking down pork was already masterful. Henry, meanwhile, was like a cold machine. He had long grown numb to bloodshed, and even instructed his son to feed the unwanted organs to the pigs.
Don't it bother you sometimes to eat their own? Don't make no difference to a hog.
This seemingly cold response was in fact a summary of Henry's first half of life, and also a reflection of his current existence. Not until the distant neigh of a white horse shattered the calm did their peaceful life break apart. Henry's instincts told him that the appearance of this horse was nothing good. Sure enough, there was blood on the saddle. His heart tightened instantly, and he immediately told his son to bring back the stray horse before following the hoofprints to search for its owner. At the bottom of a gentle slope, Henry found a man, and only after carefully scanning the surroundings to ensure it was safe did he begin to check on him. Fortunately, the man was still alive, but he had been shot in the chest. Henry immediately grabbed some moss to cover the wound and pressed it with a handkerchief to stop the bleeding. As he wondered how the man had been injured, he noticed a revolver nearby and then spotted a leather satchel in the distance. When he opened it, he found it stuffed full of dollar bills, yet there was no joy on his face. Instead, he sensed danger closing in step by step. Henry neither took the money nor saved the man. The hard lessons of his earlier life told him that staying away from trouble was the wisest choice, but he had not gone far before he stopped. He then took the satchel, checked the revolver's remaining ammunition, and erased the traces at the scene, moving swiftly and professionally. Nothing like an honest, ordinary farmer. So was he saving the man out of kindness, or did he have another purpose? After returning home, he and his son worked together to carry the man inside. As surgery was urgently needed, his innocent son wanted to fetch a doctor from town, but Henry refused, because whether the man was good or bad was still unknown. As Henry taught his son the details and methods of care, his practiced technique made Wyatt suspicious. Combined with the many scars on his father's body, Wyatt became desperate to know his father's past, but Henry remained evasive.
Because I ain't hid him from you. Now maybe you'll understand your raising.
Wyatt was completely confused, yet he understood one thing clearly. His father was anything but simple. At dusk, the farm was unusually quiet, and only then did Henry take the satchel with a heavy expression. Looking back at the gradually brightening and darkening horizon, his heart was torn between worry and inner struggle. After his son fell asleep, he carefully hid the satchel and the handgun, but he did not realize that his suspicious son was watching him the whole time. He spent the night in restless anxiety, yet no one came looking for the injured man. If the bullet was not removed, the man would not survive the night. With no time to waste, Henry decided to fetch a doctor. Before leaving, he bound the man's arms and legs to prevent him from threatening his son after waking up, but carelessly forgot the knife left on the table. And during the brief window when Henry went to get the doctor, Wyatt immediately rushed into his father's room. Inside a hidden compartment, he discovered the secret his father had concealed for many years. When he opened the satchel and saw it filled with stacks of cash, he was overwhelmed with excitement, but the appearance of a revolver made money seem worthless to him. Becoming a cowboy had always been his dream, yet because of his father's strict discipline, he had never had the chance to touch a gun. He then found an open patch of land, raised the gun, aimed at an empty bottle, and prepared to fire the first shot of his life. As his breathing steadied and his stance adjusted, he hit the target cleanly, and the crisp gunshot echoed through the valley. What he did not know was that this playful act would bring unimaginable danger. After his curiosity was satisfied, He put the gun back where it belonged, by chance. He then discovered newspaper clippings his father had kept, all filled with stories about the notorious outlaw Billy the Kid. Worried that his father might return at any moment, he glanced at them briefly and put everything back. Meanwhile, Henry was still on the road, when three strangers in the distance immediately put him on alert. He hid his horse in the woods, covered it with dry grass, and moved closer to investigate. The badges on their chests were striking, and a Mexican cowboy skilled in tracking was analyzing the footprints while the other two waited nearby. Because of the rain, and because someone had deliberately concealed the tracks, the three men lost the trail for the moment. Hidden in the grass, Henry heard every word clearly. It was obvious that the three men were searching for the man he had rescued, but Henry underestimated the Mexican cowboy's sharp senses, as even the slightest sound could not escape his ears. After exchanging a glance, the Mexican cowboy walked straight toward Henry. A sharp knife was ready to strike at any moment, with a long gun backing him up from behind. Sensing immediate danger, Henry got up and moved, narrowly escaping before racing back toward home. Meanwhile, Wyatt's carelessness gave the injured man an opportunity, as he used the knife on the table to free himself. In panic, Wyatt explained how he had rescued him step by step, but what the man truly cared about was whether anyone else was in the house. When Wyatt lied and said his father was home, the man's eyes turned vicious. If Henry had not returned in time, Wyatt might have lost his life to the blade. Henry violently subdued the man. The three officers nearby would surely find this place, and keeping the man alive might only bring disaster. Watching from the side, Wyatt trembled in fear, wondering if this was really his honest and gentle father. After knocking the man unconscious, Henry took out his gun and prepared to end it with a single shot, but the kind-hearted Wyatt stopped him. Seeing his son's shaking body, Henry put the gun away, perhaps unwilling to kill in front of him. The weak and honest mask he once wore was finally cast aside. He then tied the man up again, determined to uncover the truth behind everything. After all, the three men wearing badges nearby were the greatest threat, but the method of interrogation once again shocked his son. Henry heated the tip of a knife until it glowed red, and without any anesthetic, stabbed it straight into the man's gunshot wound. This was both a way to remove the bullet and a brutal means of interrogation.
I'm a goddamn lawman!
He ain't no lawman, Paul. He was fixing to kill me.
Ready for some whiskey?
I just told you, I'm law.
Before he could press further for answers, the three men arrived at the house. The injured man panicked and warned that they were not to be messed with, but Henry remained perfectly calm. Ignoring him, Henry immediately told his son to hide, stay away from the windows, and then picked up his gun to prepare for a fight. But the smell of gunpowder from the revolver instantly made him think of his son. There was no time to scold him now, as Henry skillfully loaded the gun with his own bullets, a caliber no ordinary farmer should possess.
Can I help you?
I'm Sheriff Sam Ketchum. These here are my deputies. We've been scouting for a man on the run. Lately goes by the name of Curry.
The fugitive they were talking about was the very man inside the house, but since all of them claimed to be sheriffs, who was lying no longer mattered. Henry only wanted to drive them away. However, Sheriff Ketchum spoke with convincing detail, claiming that Curry had committed serious crimes and was wanted across multiple states, leaving Henry unable to tell truth from lies. Yet his past experience told him that neither side could be trusted. What seemed like a calm conversation was filled with hidden danger, and even the slightest movement from them made Henry tense. But when they threatened his family, the usually composed Henry prepared to pull the trigger.
3 Hobbs McCarty, the marker said. Your last name McCarty?
That's right.
First name?
Henry.
At the moment he spoke his real name, Henry instinctively turned his body sideways, allowing him to aim at the enemy while reducing his exposed area, controlling recoil, and ensuring deadly accuracy at maximum speed. Upon hearing that name, Ketchum's tone instantly shifted, wondering if this man was related to Billy the Kid, the outlaw who had committed crimes across several states. Henry did not answer, instead ordering them to leave immediately, as this land was outside their jurisdiction. Seeing that the farmer before them remained calm yet radiated menace, the 3 men retreated in disgrace. After entering the house, Henry finally let out a breath and angrily scolded his son, delivering a hard slap across his face.
I wanted to know what it's like. I am the only boy for 50 miles that's never fired one. You won't even let me lay hand on your old shotgun, so if you can't teach me proper, I gotta do it myself.
Henry stepped forward and struck him several more times, until his son could no longer contain his anger.
Stupid, worthless old man. A whole life and nothing to show for it but this rundown old farm, and a boy's gonna leave you alone to die as soon as he's able.
What the boy did not understand was his father's painful intention, and what followed would be a harsh lesson, one meant to teach him that the outside world was brutal and unforgiving. Piecing together both sides of the story, Henry continued questioning Curry, only to learn that the real criminals were those three men. They had hijacked a stagecoach and stolen the money, and during the pursuit, Curry and his deputy killed two of them and recovered the stolen cash, while the badges came from their own sheriff's office. Everything seemed to make sense, yet the question remained, why had he not turned the money in, and instead fled with it? Curry tried to argue his way out, but Henry had already seen through his scheme, which was simply to keep the money for himself. The situation was far more complicated than Henry had expected, because neither side was innocent, but what troubled him even more was the slap he had given his son, knowing that one day the boy would leave, and he would no longer be able to protect him. Should he allow his son to pick up a gun to defend himself, or force him to live as an honest farmer? Henry was torn by painful conflict. Unfortunately, he was given no time to steady his emotions. The three outlaws had already sensed that Henry was no ordinary man, as no simple farmer handled firearms with such expertise, and reckless action would be unwise. But Dugan dismissed the concern, arrogantly questioning why three men should fear one farmer, and decided to scout alone. The more cautious leader Ketchum sent his men down the mountain to recruit more gunmen, as his instincts told him that this farmer might be Billy the Kid himself. The outlaws watched Henry's every move from the shadows. Henry behaved as usual, yet time seemed to crawl, and his inner turmoil was unbearable. As night fell, Henry finally released some of the tension and told his son to drop what he was doing and go inside immediately. He knew very well that those men would not give up until they achieved their goal, but with darkness as cover, it might work in his favor, or allow him to wipe them all out. Henry kept a constant watch on Curry, and while questioning his background, learned that they had crossed paths before and even shared mutual acquaintances. This eased Henry's guard even further. Curry also described his past as completely clean, and Henry eventually loosened one of his restraints. Yet whatever they discussed next led Henry not only to free him, but to return his gun as well. Years ago, when Curry was still a child, he worked on a farm where Billy the Kid had been taken in by the owner, but the farmer later betrayed him by spreading the news, and by the time Billy realized it, it was too late, as two unprepared shots were fired at him, one striking his chest. A legendary outlaw fell just like that. Although Curry never openly exposed Henry's identity, the two shared a silent understanding, and it seemed Curry had been telling the truth. Henry decided to release him immediately and return the satchel as well, but Ketchum launched the attack first, forcing the two men to dive for cover as bullets tore through the air. Leaving now was clearly impossible, with shadows moving outside and the number of enemies unknown. A confused Wyatt had just stepped out when he was struck by a bullet. Fortunately, it was only a superficial wound, while the strain caused Curry to collapse unconscious. Before that, he had handed the gun to Wyatt, but Henry immediately snatched it away, having no faith in his son's shooting skills. Suddenly, everything went silent, and just as Henry grew suspicious, footsteps sounded beneath the floorboards. The enemy closed in so fast that Henry had no choice but to hand the gun to his son for self-defense, while issuing a stern warning. This was not a stationary target. He had to react quickly and aim for the attacker's heart. For Wyatt, this moment had been long awaited, yet from the very start he had to be prepared to face death, and the pressure was overwhelming. Henry then used a feint and sprinted for the shotgun, quickly loading it before stepping outside to take the initiative. As he moved, he fired 2 shots beneath the house, reloaded and changed angles before firing again, sending the outlaws scrambling in panic. Henry raised his gun and dropped one with a single shot. Thunder and lightning flashed in the distance, as if foretelling the arrival of a deadly force.
Where's the others? Stay close.
Go to hell.
After several failed attempts to extract information, Henry ended the outlaw's life with a chokehold. His son stood quietly behind him watching the scene, clearly confirming the connection between his father and Billy the Kid, and the savage beast of the West was fully awakened by this act of killing. When faced with his son's questioning, Henry remained calm and finally let down his guard. This man had only come to scout, and the real storm would arrive very soon. While disposing of the body, Henry accidentally noticed a marking, and a single glance sent him deep into thought. He then tossed the body straight into the pig pen. These pigs, long fed on meat by Henry, grew more excited by the smell of blood than by feed. After returning inside, Henry bandaged his son's wound, and Wyatt finally seized the chance to ask the questions weighing on his heart.
Who are you?
I'm who I am.
Henry did not admit that he was Billy the Kid, because the man who returned to his family was his true self. Billy the Kid was merely a name he once used to disguise himself to the world. Wyatt desperately wanted to know about his father's past, but with his back turned, Henry regretfully said that before meeting Wyatt's mother, he had done things he deeply regretted. It seemed that choosing retirement was his greatest redemption, and although his son continued to press, Henry could never reveal those violent and bloody memories that would scar a child's heart. This was a silent refusal from an aging father toward his own mistakes, and a way to preserve the last shred of humanity by refusing to face the past. But his son could not understand, and in anger he stormed out the door. Soon after, he would realize just how terrifying the outside world truly was, and the painful intention behind his father's desire to raise him in safety. Henry stood guard outside the door all night, appearing calm on the surface, yet his blood was boiling as he almost wished the enemy would come and end it all. When no one appeared for a long time, Henry decided to leave immediately, but Curry wanted to stay behind to delay the outlaws. Knowing his injuries meant he could not escape far anyway, Henry did not try to persuade him, but the kind-hearted Wyatt stepped forward to plead, only for Henry to coldly turn away, as protecting his family was now his top priority. Unexpectedly, the outlaws gave him no chance to flee, and although Henry wanted his son to leave first, the growing number of enemies made survival increasingly unlikely. Henry quickly pulled his son back inside, then stood at the doorway and took a deep breath, knowing that since they pressed so aggressively, he would show no mercy.
Anybody home? The other option is we take him.
You take that deal. I signed up for this, you didn't.
When Henry refused to hand over the man, the leader Ketchum dragged out his brother-in-law, instantly throwing Henry into panic.
Listen to me. What's going to happen will happen quick. I'll stall as long as I can, but I want you to sneak out back and hole up at Rogers Hill and wait for me there.
Let me fight.
I can't do this right if I'm worried about protecting you.
This time you are. You don't, they're gonna kill us all.
At this moment Henry trusted Curry more, but Ketchum began threatening his son. This was Henry's greatest weakness, and the reason he was forced to consider compromise. Combined with Curry's persuasion, Henry's resolve began to waver, yet Wyatt clearly saw the situation, realizing that if they tried to leave now, they might be shot before even mounting a horse. Caught in a dilemma, Henry suddenly thought of a solution. It was the classic Western duel he excelled at. A draw speed of 0.3 seconds that could defeat anyone, but this outdated and predictable tactic failed to deceive Ketchum, and instead drew mockery. With superior numbers and firepower, why choose such a childish method of confrontation? Left with no choice, Henry stepped outside to face them. Ketchum was surprised, as he had not seen such courage in many years, and wondered if this man truly was Billy the Kid. He pressed the brother-in-law for answers, but received none. He then tried to force Henry to admit it, yet Henry remained silent from start to finish. Even so, Ketchum still wanted a peaceful resolution with this dangerous man. If Henry handed over the man and the money, everyone would be spared. Otherwise the place would be soaked in blood. What he did not expect was that Henry turned the tables on him.
You leave my brother-in-law right where he is. Turn and ride your asses off my property. You do that, and I'll let you live.
Ketchum could not believe it, wondering if Henry failed to grasp the situation, but the brother-in-law gave him an answer.
You have no idea the hailstorm you fixing to let loose.
Still stunned, Ketchum questioned who was really threatening whom, then shot the brother-in-law dead. Henry stood frozen, never expecting his son to lose control and rush out of the house. Henry fired while retreating back inside, and when Curry checked the enemy's position he was shot in the leg, making the resistance even harder. The outlaws outside continued shouting, while Henry took the moment to teach his son another lesson.
You nearly got us both killed, which is about all your tears and rage would have amounted to.
He then put on the gun belt he had kept hidden away, and only then did he formally admit that he was the legendary gunslinger Billy the Kid. Curry listened in shock to the sound of leather and metal rubbing together, as the doubts in his heart were finally resolved.
He's who?
Henry walked outside with his hands raised, appearing to surrender, but was actually calling out the names of the outlaws one by one, as familiar Spanish echoed once more. Before Ketchum could even process it, Henry fired a shot, and a fierce exchange erupted. Henry's marksmanship was as deadly as ever, with lightning-fast draws and shots that never missed their mark. As he retreated inside to reload, Curry provided covering fire, and once reloaded, Henry spotted an outlaw sneaking around the back. He again warned his son not to act recklessly, telling him to watch how a real fight was handled, then took a handful of bullets and went out to engage. He lay in ambush along the enemy's path and silently took one down with a blade. Using a knife saved ammunition and avoided exposing his position. Immediately after, Henry grabbed a wood-splitting axe and eliminated another, then fired an extra shot to be sure, because in his world, either he lived or they did. The Mexican tracker and another outlaw tried to flank from the rear, but the sight of the bodies sent a chill down their spines. As they lowered their heads searching for Henry, they were taken out by a single gunshot. The Mexican's legs went weak, as tracking was his specialty, but risking his life in a gunfight was not. Just as he tried to flee, Henry blocked his path with a raised gun, and the Mexican immediately dropped his weapon and raised his hands, as all his companions were dead. Yet while begging for mercy, he pulled out a small knife, attempting a sneak attack. What he forgot was that Henry's draw speed was only 0.3 seconds, making every move he made look like slow motion. Henry counted the bodies scattered across the ground, but the leader Ketchum was nowhere to be seen. Just as he was searching around, Ketchum, hiding in the distance, fired first, but the shot missed due to the long range. Once he pinpointed the enemy's position, Henry moved swiftly to take cover, reloaded his gun, and circled around to attempt a sneak attack. Unfortunately, Ketchum noticed him, and with no cover available, Henry was forced into a direct confrontation. Perhaps due to rust in his shooting, Henry's first shot missed Ketchum, and instead he was hit squarely by return fire. Ketchum pressed the attack, while Henry fired back as he retreated into the woods, the two taking cover behind trees in a tense standoff. Henry reloaded in advance, while Ketchum had already emptied his magazine. Seizing the moment, Henry shifted positions left and right, suppressing fire while searching for an opening. After reloading, Ketchum leaned out to return fire, exposing just enough of himself for Henry to seize the chance and drop him with a single shot. Ketchum struggled to his feet and hid behind a smaller tree, firing non-stop despite the pain. Henry dodged and advanced toward him. Once in position, he fired again, hitting Ketchum, and this time Ketchum could no longer stand. Henry reloaded once more, while Ketchum made a final desperate effort, using his last strength to shoot Henry in the arm. But Henry did not give him another chance to pull the trigger. "If no one provokes me, I provoke no one, but if someone crosses me, I will strike back." This was Henry's way after choosing retirement. It was completely different from his aggressive style in his youth. He then hunched over his wounded body and made his way home, his back looking weary and tired. Toward Curry, he showed the greatest mercy, yet the rare kindness he extended to an outsider ultimately became the cause of his death. While bandaging Curry's wounds, lacking proper gauze, Henry tore off Curry's sleeve, and the gang tattoo on his arm instantly reminded him of the outlaw he had scouted the night before. The two men were from the same gang. Once exposed, Curry fired without hesitation, shot and stumbling backward. Henry was filled with disbelief, never imagining he had been completely played by this man. Curry then revealed the whole truth, admitting that he had joined the gang years ago, and that his lawman was real. He was simply the inside man for this robbery. He had planned to quit after this final job, but greed clouded his judgment, so he took all the stolen money, leaving himself no way back except to run. Now he had a new ambition, to kill Billy the Kid and make a name for himself. At the critical moment, the timid and impulsive son fired the most important shot of his life, proving that he had transformed into a true cowboy of the West.
You hold on, I'll get the doctor.
I don't believe in redemption, but a man can find some kind of solace. He's got a boy like you to raise. The world is changing. You go see it. It's a place I don't belong in no more. But I'm hoping you do.
At that moment, Henry finally let go of his bias and allowed his son to step out into the world. This world no longer belonged to an era ruled by outlaws like them. Henry quietly closed his eyes. Looking back on Henry's life, some say he was a spiritual symbol of the Western cowboy. Unyielding, resolute, and decisive. Others say he was nothing more than a vicious and ruthless criminal, but in the context of that era, survival was the only rule, and concepts like law and morality were meaningless in the face of life and death. Even without Billy the Kid, another kid would have risen in his place. This film captures a fragment of Billy the Kid's later years, exploring redemption, family, kinship, and human nature. Through this ordeal, what Henry truly wanted was for his son to understand the greed of human hearts and how low moral boundaries can fall. At the same time, he felt a quiet regret that his son had grown up too sheltered. It was not until Wyatt fired a shot and took a life that Henry finally closed his eyes in peace. The future must be faced alone. A father can protect you for a while, but not for a lifetime. Aren't our own fathers the same, wanting us to live carefree lives, yet fearing the helpless look on our faces when we finally face the cruelty of the world? I am a movie enthusiast. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.